Hi, this is Kent Darcie. I created a series of audio programs for Transworld Radio that address the basic challenges that adults with divorced parents face. And we decided to put this series on our YouTube channel. It's a series of 10 programs that cover basic issues like anger, anxiety, forgiveness, and other areas. But before you listen, I wanted to just cover a couple of basic things. First, this series was created for a men's ministry, so it's speaking to men. But the principles that we talk about apply to everybody. And second, it was created as an international program. It has been translated into a number of languages. So from time to time, you may hear a reference to something that's not American, but it's pretty rare. But I thought I'd give you a heads up on that. And lastly, there are a lot more resources for adults with divorced parents on our website, hopeforadp.com. I hope you'll find this series helpful and shareable. Take care.
Many people appear to have normal lives. From the outside, I look like I had a normal, successful life. But on the inside, my issues were slowly destroying my marriage. So outside appearances don't count.
Welcome to Champions Arise. I'm your host, Foster Braun. In the last 9 programs, we've explored some of the issues adults with divorced parents face. Our guest, Kent Darcie, the founder of Adult Children of Divorce Ministries, has given us an insider's view to situations, challenges, and dilemmas adults from broken homes can experience. We've learned that due in part to trust, fear, and anger issues, adults from divorced homes have a significantly higher chance of divorcing themselves. Kent's passion has been clear when it comes to sharing information and resources that can help these individuals to break the cycle of divorce. Today we'll finish this series with some questions and answers with Kent. Since this issue affects all of us in one way or another, I hope that you'll stay with us for this important program. Kent, we've discussed a number of important topics in this series, and we really appreciate your willingness to guide us through with this helpful review as well. So, okay, here. Our first question is, can anything good come out of our parents' divorce?
Well, absolutely. Romans 8, verse 28 says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. If we have a biblical perspective, lots of good things can result from our parents' divorce.
So can you give me examples?
Well, in my case, I wouldn't have this ministry if my parents hadn't split up. Also, I love to cook, mostly because I had to learn. My mom was out working.
Right.
But in general, adults with divorced parents are empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
We have a heart that wants to help the wounded heal. We also tend to be more independent, self-sufficient, and flexible.
Basically, because as you said, with your cooking example, you had to be.
Well, yeah. And what may have seemed like a negative at the time can prove to be a great asset, actually, in adulthood.
All right, then. Next question.
Okay.
Is it okay to love my stepmother more than my mother?
Okay. The short answer is yes.
Mm.
But the real question here is, can we love our stepmom more than our mom without feeling guilty?
Yeah.
One of the problems adult children of divorce have is believing that they can be honest without being hurt. Not that we're liars. It's just that many of us grew up thinking that we had to please other people all the time.
Yes.
For example, you spend 2 weeks with your father during the summer, and you have a great time. When you go back home, can you tell your mother what fun you had?
Before I went through these programs, I think I would have said, oh, yeah, of course.
Well, the answer in the world of the child of divorce is no. Most likely, the mom who is raising the family by herself is still angry at your dad.
Oh, yeah.
And she doesn't want to hear about the great time you had. So when your mom asks how the vacation was, you give her just enough information to answer the questions, but not enough to upset her. Unfortunately, and this is kind of the problem, is we carry this method of handling honesty into our adulthood. But in answering this question, is it okay to love your stepmother more than the mother? It's important to be honest with yourself. Actually, you want to give yourself permission to be yourself. And that means you can love who you want to, including your stepmom. But again, it's important to have godly counsel to help you work through this process.
It certainly is. All right, here's the next question. Why do we need to deal with this issue at all? My parents are divorced, and I'm doing just fine, and the people I know with divorced parents will have their normal lives.
Well, good question. Many people appear to have normal lives. Okay, I mean, from the outside, I look like I had a normal, successful life. But on the inside, my issues were slowly destroying my marriage. So outside appearances don't count. Now, to the I'm doing fine thing, I would ask the individual which one of these four groups they're in. People in the first group are really doing fine. This is our first group.
Okay.
And basically they're doing fine because they've actually dealt with their parents' divorce in a healthy and ongoing way.
Are there a lot of people in this group?
No. This group has the smallest number of people as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
But that's the first group. The second group includes those who believe they're doing okay, but are unaware of the issues that we've talked about in this series and how they're negatively impacting their relationships and marriages. I believe this is the largest group. I was in this group. But logically, if everybody really is okay, why is the divorce rate so high among adults with divorced parents? Okay, so that's the second group. The third group includes those who know there are problems and they've connected them to their parents' divorce, but they don't know how to address their issues. For example, they know they have trust issues from their parents' divorce, but they don't know how to overcome them. And the last group includes those people who know there are issues and they're actively working to overcome them. So the person with this question, really needs to decide which group they're in. And the best way to honestly do that is to ask your spouse or a close friend.
And Adult Children of Divorce Ministries offers resources for people in all of these groups, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The next question we have here fits that last one. My wife's parents are divorced. She doesn't think there's a problem, but she has major issues with trusting people and with anger. So how do I get her to admit that her parents' divorce is still affecting her?
Okay. First, keep her in prayer. Second, love her. Third, and this is an important one, make sure she has no reason to fear you or have any reason to not trust you. And fourth, see if she'll listen to the first teaching program in the series. See if she'll listen to it. It's an overview and it tends to open people's eyes. Keep in mind, though, that acknowledging that there's a problem requires dealing with it. And dealing with hurtful divorce issues is painful, and we don't like pain. So keep praying for her and seeking the Lord's wisdom. That's what my wife did, and God worked a miracle in me and in our marriage, too.
That's exciting to hear. That you are a real living example of
Absolutely.
that. Okay, the next question is, what would you say is the biggest issue that affects adult children of divorce?
Individually, the research tends to say unexpressed anger is a major problem, and we talked about that. As a group, I would say two things. Unawareness that their parents' divorce is still impacting them, and believing lies instead of God's truth.
Can you give me an example to help me understand that lie that they believe?
Sure. A lot of adults in broken homes have issues with feeling unworthy, for example. They believe they aren't worthy of anything good, and that is a lie. God clearly says that we are worthy. Romans 5, verses 6 through 8, and this is in a Phillips translation. It illustrates this truth, and it says, "And we can see that it was while we were powerless to help ourselves that Christ died for sinful men. In human experience, it is a rare thing for one man to give his life for another, even if the latter be a good man. Though there have been a few who have had the courage to do it. Yet, the proof of God's amazing love is this, that it was while we were sinners that Christ died for us."
Oh boy, that is a powerful verse.
Yeah, because it's God's truth. But God's truth also causes us to have to respond to it. So what I'm saying is if God believes we are worthy enough to send his son Jesus here to die for us, we can't say we aren't worthy. It's contradictory. One of us is wrong.
And it is most certainly not God.
Yeah. If the choice is between me being wrong and God being wrong, it's me. And, I dealt with this issue personally, with this worth thing. But when I really grasped the verse and stared into the face of the cross, I found that I could never again say that I was unworthy. God's truth crushed Satan's lie in my life.
That's a powerful way of putting that. Okay, now here's a little longer question, but I'm very interested in your answer. My parents were a disaster. They weren't abusive, but were unhappily married and shouldn't have become parents. I was in high school when they divorced, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Sometimes I wish they'd worked it out, but am I better off because they divorced?
That's basically the what if my parents should have divorced question. I hear that often. Interestingly, I hear it from people whose parents are divorced, and I hear it from people whose parents didn't divorce, but they think they should have for many of the same reasons, you just read. Okay, first of all, it doesn't apply to abusive or unsafe situations.
Okay.
With that said, while every divorce is an individual fingerprint, overall, over the long haul, you're probably better off if they didn't divorce. And that's because even if the family is dysfunctional, most of the time, they still tend to behave during major events like weddings, funerals, or when children are born.
They kind of pull it all together.
Yeah, if there's a terminal illness or whatever, they kind of get together, even just for that.
Right.
But, and this is the key, for adults with divorced parents, these same major events like weddings, funerals, birth of a child, terminal illness, can be stressful because of the infighting and the competing interests of parents and siblings and step-parents. Now, I'm in no way minimizing. I hope they hear my heart. I'm in no way minimizing, what you've gone through when you ask a question like this. And I'm not talking about cases of abuse or violence. But again, the answer is that probably you would have been better off if they'd stayed together. And I realize this is not much consolation.
It really sounds like you have struggled with answering this question.
Yeah. When somebody asks me that question, it just breaks my heart because they love their parents.
Right.
But they're so wounded. And it seems like they're stuck between two bad choices. And it's particularly tough for Christians because, we aren't free to ask those type questions.
Mm-hmm. But wait a minute. What do you mean we aren't free to ask those kind of questions?
Well, think about it. What would happen if you're in a men's group or you're in a group of people after church service and you said, I think my parents should have divorced? What would their responses be?
Well, it's kind of funny, but because before we did this series, I know what my response would have been, and probably scriptural, but certainly not very compassionate at all. Boy, now...
And that's why I do this. Your perspective on adults with divorced parents, and our listeners, hopefully, is very different now. But I want to shift back to the person who asked this question. The more important point here is I encourage you to talk with someone about something like this. Children of divorce rarely talk to anyone about the divorce, and unfortunately, it doesn't change when we grow up. I found even siblings have never talked about what happened around the parents' divorce or how they felt about it. We don't talk to our spouses about it, and we don't share it with God either. And this is bad. It's very important to deal with these tough issues with someone's help because they won't just go away. Now, I know the thought of talking to someone might be scary, but it'll be tremendous help. And if you don't have anyone where you are, contact me through the website, adultchildrenofdivorce.net. I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, boy, Ken. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have.
Okay.
Would you like to share any final thoughts?
Sure. One of the biggest obstacles to healing is fear. Adults with divorced parents can have the fear of conflict and abandonment and fear of inadequacy, fear of trusting people. The list just goes on. But the Bible says perfect love casts out fear. Mm-hmm. With God, all things are possible.
Amen.
And I encourage you to listen to this series again and check out the resources we have on our ministry website. It's absolutely worth the effort.
Thank you so much, Kent.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this series of presentations. I hope you found them helpful and that you will listen to our second 10-part series. In that one, we'll talk about a variety of topics, including navigating our parents' different worlds, dealing with fears, gray divorce, and other really important topics. Right now, you can find a variety of resources for adults with divorced parents on our website, hopeforadp.com. That's hope, the number 4, adp.com. Thanks for listening, and please share these links with anyone you think they can help. Take care.